I've always been fascinated by ancient buildings, with their creaky floorboards that seem to whisper secrets of the past, dark corridors leading to unknown rooms, and stories that live in every corner like old spirits. So, when my friends, Mike and Sarah, suggested spending the night in an old mansion on the outskirts of town, where, according to legends, people disappeared, I couldn't refuse. We arrived there before sunset, when the sky was already beginning to be covered with soft shades of twilight. The house towered among overgrown trees, its windows broken, like knocked-out eyes, and the doors creaked, as if groaning, welcoming us into their embrace. We set up our sleeping bags in a large hall with a fireplace where luxury once reigned, and now only cobwebs and dust testified to its former grandeur. When night fell, we gathered around the fire, which crackled and threw sparks into the darkness like little stars falling to the ground. Mike told jokes, and Sarah prepared roasted marshmallows. But suddenly, the marshmallows in Sarah's hands turned into black ash, as if all the life had been sucked out of them, leaving only dull coal. We looked at each other in surprise, but decided it was just an unfortunate accident. However, when we started hearing footsteps on the second floor, where we were sure we left no one, the jokes stopped. We fell silent, listening to every rough sound coming from above. Maybe it's animals. Mike tried to reassure us, but his voice trembled as if he didn't believe his own words. Suddenly, the wind swayed the old curtains, and we saw the silhouette of a person in the window. He stood motionless, looking at us with empty eyes that reflected only the moonlight. We froze in fear, but when we looked again, the figure had disappeared, as if it had never been there. "We need to get out of here," Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible. We agreed, gathered our things, and ran to the doors. But the doors, which we had left open, were tightly closed. We pushed and pulled, but they wouldn't budge, as if the house itself had decided that we were now its eternal guests. Standing in the darkness, I felt the old house breathing around us. Its breath was heavy and uneven, as if it was struggling for every breath. Mike and Sarah sat motionless, their faces reflecting the fear I felt in my heart. "We must find another way out," I whispered, trying to stay calm. We began to carefully walk around the walls, looking for hidden doors or passages. Our hands slid over the cold stone, but each time we encountered a dead wall. Then I noticed something strange. The old portrait of a woman that had previously hung on the wall was gone. In its place was only a dust stain. I approached closer and saw that under the stain was a cut-out contour in the wall. "There's something here," I said, pulling on the contour. A secret door creaked open, leading us into a narrow corridor. We moved forward, but the corridor seemed endless. Our steps echoed in the silence, but suddenly I heard a whisper. It was so quiet that at first I thought it was my thoughts, but the whisper grew louder, and I realized it wasn't me. "Do not go," the invisible presence whispered. "He is waiting for you." We stopped, but the whisper continued, becoming more demanding. "Turn back." It sounded not like a warning, but like an order. We hurried forward, but suddenly the corridor branched into three paths. "Which way should we choose?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling with fear. "I don't know," Mike replied, "but we can't stand here forever." We chose the middle path, but after a few steps the corridor suddenly collapsed, and we fell down. The fall seemed like an eternity, but finally we hit the hard ground. We found ourselves in a dungeon where the air was heavy and damp. The walls were covered with strange symbols that glowed with a faint green light. In the center of the room stood a large stone table on which lay old books and artifacts. "This place looks like some kind of ritual hall," Sarah whispered, looking around the room. We began to look for a way out, but suddenly we heard a voice. It was not a whisper, but a clear, authoritative voice that echoed from the darkness. "Welcome to my world," said the voice. "You sought secrets, and here they are before you. But remember, some secrets are better left undiscovered." We turned around and saw a figure standing in the shadows. He was tall and thin, his face hidden under a hood. "Who are you?" I asked, trying to hide my fear. "I am the keeper of the secrets of this house," he replied. "And now you have become part of its history." He raised his hand, and the walls began to tremble.
books and artifacts flew into the air, swirling around us in a whirlwind of ancient knowledge.
"You may leave this house," he said, "but only if you perform the ritual." "What ritual?" asked Sarah. "A ritual that requires a sacrifice," he replied, and his voice sounded like an echo from the past. We understood that we had no choice. To survive, we had to do something unthinkable. But were we ready to sacrifice a part of ourselves for freedom? We stood before an unknown choice that could change our lives forever. The sacrifice demanded by the ritual was vague and terrifying. Could we sacrifice a part of ourselves, not knowing what it would be? Was this even reality, or just an illusion created by this living house? "What if we refuse?" I asked, glancing at Mike and Sarah. "Then you will stay here forever," replied the man in the hood, his voice ringing in our ears like a bell. We exchanged glances. Each of us knew there was no other way out. We agreed to the ritual. The man in the hood pointed to the stone table, where the artifacts lay. "You must take these items and place them in their respective places around the room," he said. We did everything as he said, feeling the atmosphere in the room becoming more tense. When we finished, the man in the hood began to read the incantation. The words were unfamiliar, but they resonated in our souls. The air became heavy, and the ground began to tremble. The symbols on the walls glowed brighter, and the artifacts began to spin in the air. We felt the energy gathering in the center of the room, forming a vortex. "Now you must step into the center," said the man in the hood. We took a step forward, and at that moment, the vortex exploded with light. We closed our eyes, and when we opened them, we were outside the house. The sun was shining, and the air was fresh. We looked around, but the house was gone. In its place was only an overgrown, empty field. Did we get out?" asked Sarah, her voice full of disbelief. "Yes, we got out," replied Mike. But there was something else in his eyes. Not just relief, but also fear. We walked away from there, not looking back. But I knew that a part of us remained in that house, in that ritual. We lost something important, something that could not be measured or explained. And this loss will haunt us forever. The story ended, but its echo will stay with us forever. We survived, but at what cost? This is a question that none of us can answer.